3 weeks after Thanksgiving, I sat in my Chicago penthouse, staring at the newspaper headline about Miller's Diner facing foreclosure. The irony cut deep. That Thanksgiving dinner still echoed in my mind. My father's voice screaming that I was a worthless disappointment, my mother's tears as she told me to go live in the streets like the failure you are. They discovered I'd dropped out of law school 5 years ago and exploded. What they didn't know was that I'd built a tech empire worth millions. I just smiled that night, gathered my purse, and walked out. Now karma was knocking. The memory of that November evening remained vivid and painful. I'd driven 4 hours from Chicago to my parents' modest ranch house in Westerville, Ohio, carrying a pumpkin pie from their favorite bakery and genuine hope for reconnection. 2 years had passed since our last real conversation, and I thought maybe this Thanksgiving could bridge the growing distance between us. Mom had set the dining room table with her cherished china, the delicate blue and white pattern she'd inherited from Grandma Ruth. The turkey sat golden brown at the center, surrounded by all the traditional sides: mashed potatoes, green bean casserole cranberry sauce, and her famous stuffing with sage and celery. The house smelled like childhood memories, warm and comforting in ways that made my chest tight with nostalgia. My younger brother Jake arrived with his wife Amanda, both of them glowing with news they were bursting to share. Jake worked at First National Bank downtown, and Amanda taught third grade at Lincoln Elementary. They'd been married 2 years, and their happiness felt infectious as they settled into their usual spots at the table. So, Dad said, carving the turkey with ceremonial precision, Jake got promoted to senior loan officer last month, youngest person in the bank's history to reach that position. Jake's chest puffed with pride. 25 years old and already managing commercial accounts worth over $1 million each. Mr. Henderson says I have real potential for branch management within 5 years. Amanda squeezed his hand. Tell them our other news, honey. They exchanged glances before Jake announced, we're expecting our first baby in June. Amanda's 12 weeks along. The table erupted in celebration. Mom immediately started crying, happy tears rushing around the table to hug Amanda. Dad stood up to shake Jake's hand, his smile broader than I'd seen in years. The joy felt genuine and beautiful, and I found myself genuinely thrilled for them both. A grandchild. Mom whispered, still holding Amanda's hands. Oh, sweetheart, this is the most wonderful news. Dad raised his wine glass. To Jake and Amanda, and to new beginnings, this family keeps growing stronger. The conversation flowed easily after that. Dad talked enthusiastically about Miller's Diner, their family restaurant downtown. Business has been incredible this year. We're actually looking at opening a second location in Grove City. The breakfast crowd has tripled since we added those new pancake varieties, and lunch numbers are through the roof. Mom nodded eagerly. Your father has been working 16-hour days, but it's paying off beautifully. The Grove City location could double our revenue within 2 years. They painted pictures of expansion success and growing prosperity. Dad described plans for hiring additional staff, updating equipment, and potentially franchising the concept. Their excitement seemed authentic, their confidence unshakable. Eventually, attention turned toward me. How's law school treating you, Hayley? Dad asked, cutting into his turkey. Still on track to graduate next spring. My stomach dropped. This was the moment I'd been dreading for months. Actually, Dad, I need to tell you something about that. The table went quiet. Amanda continued eating, oblivious to the tension suddenly crackling through the air. Jake lowered his fork, sensing drama approaching. I left law school 5 years ago. I never finished my degree. Mom's face went white. Dad's jaw tightened dangerously. The silence stretched for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. What do you mean you left? Mom's voice was barely a whisper. I dropped out during my second year. Law wasn't the right path for me, so I pursued other opportunities instead. Dad's chair scraped against the hardwood floor as he stood up abruptly. Other opportunities. What other opportunities? We paid $43,000 in tuition for 2 years. $43,000, Hayley. I know it seems like a lot of money, but I can explain. Explain what? How you threw away your entire future. How you wasted our retirement savings on nothing. Jake leaned forward. Wait, so what have you been doing for the past 5 years? Where have you been working? Heat crawled up my neck. I've been developing mobile applications, building software. Dad's laugh was harsh and bitter. Software, you mean playing around on computers? That's not a career, Hayley. That's a hobby for teenagers. Dad, if you just listen. No, you listen. His voice rose to a shout that made Amanda flinch. You're 28 years old. 28. Your brother owns a house, has a stable career, and is starting a family. What do you have to show for your life? Nothing, absolutely nothing. Mom started crying softly. We told everyone you were going to be a lawyer. Everyone in town knows we were so proud. How can I face the church ladies? How can I face our neighbors? This is embarrassing for the entire family, Jake added, shaking his head. I always defended you when people asked why you never came home anymore. Now I understand why. Dad paced behind his chair, gesticulating wildly. We sacrificed everything for your education. Everything. We took out a second mortgage on this house to pay for law school. Mom worked double shifts at the hospital for 3 years to cover your living expenses. What it, please? Well, please what? Please pretend this is acceptable. Please act like throwing away a law degree for computer games is normal. The room felt suffocating. Amanda looked uncomfortable, clearly wishing she could disappear. Jake watched the scene unfold with a mixture of fascination and superiority, like he was witnessing final confirmation of what he'd always suspected about me. Mom wiped her eyes with her napkin. Where are you even living? How are you paying rent? Are you working at some fast food place? I have an apartment in Chicago. I'm doing fine financially. Fine. Dad's voice dripped with sarcasm. Define fine. Are you making minimum wage? Are you living paycheck to paycheck like every other college dropout? Before I could answer, he continued his tirade. You know what this is? This is failure. Pure, complete failure. We raised you better than this, Hayley. We gave you every opportunity, every advantage, and you threw it all away for fantasy dreams about computer programming. You're 28 and have nothing. Jake said quietly, but his words cut deeper than Dad's shouting. No degree, no real job, no house, no husband, no kids. What kind of life is that? Mom's sobs grew louder. I can't believe this. I just can't believe our daughter turned out this way. Dad pointed toward the front door. You know what? If you want to live like a failure, go ahead. But don't come into our house and pretend everything is fine. Don't sit at our table acting like your choices are acceptable. Robert, Mom said weakly, but he cut her off. No, Linda. I'm done pretending. If she wants to throw her life away, she can do it somewhere else. Go live in the streets like the failure you are. Maybe that will teach you what real life is actually like. The words hit like physical blows. I felt my chest tighten and my eyes begin to burn, but I refused to give them the satisfaction of seeing me break down. I stood up slowly, reaching for my purse on the side table. My phone buzzed with a notification, and I glanced down instinctively. The screen showed an automated message from my investment account. Quarterly dividend payment of $2,347,812 has been deposited to your primary account. I stared at those numbers for a moment, feeling something shift inside my chest. A strange calm settled over me, replacing the hurt and anger with something closer to amusement. I looked up at my family, Dad red-faced and furious, Mom crying into her napkin. Jake smug with vindication, Amanda studying her plate awkwardly. They had no idea, not the slightest clue. I smiled, not a bitter smile or a sarcastic one, but a genuine, peaceful smile. Thank you for dinner, I said quietly. The turkey was delicious. And I walked out the front door, leaving them all staring after me in confusion. The next morning, I woke up in my penthouse apartment 30 floors above downtown Chicago. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a breathtaking view of Lake Michigan, its gray-blue water stretching endlessly toward the horizon. The November sky was crisp and clear, and morning sunlight streamed across my hardwood floors, illuminating the minimalist furniture I'd chosen carefully over the past 3 years. My routine never varied on weekdays. Coffee first, Ethiopian beans ground fresh brewed in my French press. While it steeped, I reviewed overnight messages from my development team. Streamline apps operated across multiple time zones with programmers in San Francisco, contractors in Austin, and a growing customer service department right here in Chicago. By 7:30, I was dressed in my usual work attire, dark jeans, cashmere sweater, comfortable flats, and heading down to the parking garage. My silver Lexus was practical rather than flashy, reliable transportation that didn't draw attention or signal wealth. I'd learned early that projecting success could complicate business relationships. The Streamline App's offices occupied 2 full floors of a converted warehouse in River North. Exposed brick walls, polished concrete floors, and industrial lighting created the kind of tech startup atmosphere that attracted top talent. Our employees enjoyed standing desks, multiple coffee stations, a fully equipped kitchen, and a game room with ping-pong tables and vintage arcade machines. "Morning, Hayley," Sarah called from the reception desk. At 26, she was brilliant at managing my schedule and anticipating my needs. She'd graduated from Northwestern with degrees in business and communications, and I was grooming her for eventual promotion to operations manager. "Any urgent messages?" I asked, accepting the tablet she handed me. "Marcus wants to talk about the acquisition timeline. The lawyers finished reviewing the TechFlow proposal, and there are some concerns about their intellectual property clauses. Also, David Chen from Meridian Investments is flying in Thursday to discuss the new funding round." I nodded, scrolling through the priorities. "Schedule Marcus for 10 o'clock, move the legal review to after lunch, and confirm David's dinner reservation at Alinea." Marcus Webb had been my business partner for 4 years, ever since we'd connected at a mobile development conference in Austin. He was older, more experienced, and brought invaluable connections from his previous work at Microsoft. More importantly, he shared my vision for creating software that actually solved real problems instead of just chasing the latest trends. Streamline Apps had grown from a single productivity application into a suite of 3 interconnected programs that helped small businesses manage their operations more efficiently. TaskFlow handled project management and team coordination. ExpenseTrack simplified accounting and financial reporting. TeamSync integrated communication across departments and remote workers. What made our products special wasn't revolutionary technology or flashy interfaces. Instead, we focused obsessively on user experience, making complex business processes feel intuitive and effortless. Our customer retention rate was 93%, and annual revenue had grown from $200,000 in year 1 to $47 million last year. The path to this success had been anything but straightforward. 5 years ago, I'd been a miserable second-year law student at Northwestern, spending 18 hours a day memorizing case law and writing briefs about subjects that bored me to tears. The coursework felt like intellectual torture, and I dreaded every class, every assignment, every interaction with professors who seemed to view students as obstacles rather than human beings. The breaking point came during a particularly brutal constitutional law seminar. Professor Williams had spent 90 minutes dissecting a Supreme Court decision about interstate commerce regulations, and I found myself wondering why I was wasting my life learning about legal precedents when I could be building something meaningful instead. That night, I'd called the registrar's office and formally withdrawn from the university. The tuition refund was substantial, nearly $38,000 after penalties and fees. Instead of returning that money to my parents, I'd used it as seed capital for my first application. TaskFlow started as a simple project management tool I'd built for myself to organize freelance web design work. Friends began asking to use it. Then their colleagues wanted access, and within 6 months, I had 400 paying subscribers, generating enough revenue to cover my basic living expenses. The real breakthrough came when I realized that small business owners needed integrated solutions, not disconnected applications. ExpenseTrack launched 18 months later, followed by TeamSync the year after that. Each product complemented the others, creating an ecosystem that became increasingly valuable as customers adopted multiple components. By year 3, we employed 47 people and occupied our current office space. By year 4, major corporations were inquiring about licensing our technology. Last month, TechFlow Industries had made a formal acquisition offer worth $153 million. My personal financial situation was beyond anything I'd imagined possible. The quarterly dividend payment that had appeared on my phone during Thanksgiving dinner was typical. Streamline Apps generated consistent profits that far exceeded our operational expenses. My annual income had reached $12 million, and my total net worth approached $30 million when including company equity and investment portfolios. Hayley, Sarah's voice interrupted my thoughts. "Marcus is here for your 10 o'clock. Marcus entered my office carrying his usual oversized coffee and wearing the kind of rumpled shirt that suggested he'd been coding until 3 in the morning. At 41, he had graying temples and wire-rimmed glasses that made him look more like a college professor than a tech entrepreneur. We need to talk about the family situation, he said, settling into the leather chair across from my desk. I told him about Thanksgiving dinner, though I'd avoided most of the emotional details. Marcus knew about my complicated relationship with my parents and my decision to keep our business success private. What about it? Sarah mentioned that your parents' restaurant is in financial trouble. How much trouble are we talking about? I pulled up the information I'd gathered through discreet inquiries. Miller's Diner owes approximately $86,000 in back rent, plus outstanding balances to food suppliers, equipment leasing companies, and the utility company. They've been covering operational expenses with credit cards and personal loans. Marcus whistled softly. That's significant debt for a small restaurant. What are you thinking about doing? I'm not sure yet. Part of me wants to help them directly, but another part thinks they need to learn some humility first. The acquisition offer complicates things, he pointed out. If we accept TechFlow's proposal, your payout alone would be over $80 million. At that point, keeping your success secret becomes basically impossible. He was right, of course. The acquisition had been under discussion for months, and both of us were leaning toward accepting. TechFlow wanted our technology and our team, but they'd allow us to operate independently within their corporate structure. The financial terms were extraordinary, and the deal would provide resources for expansion that we couldn't achieve alone. There's another issue, I said. My brother Jake has been pretending to be more successful than he actually is. I think he lost his bank job and hasn't told anyone. Family dynamics are complicated, but you can't manage everyone else's relationships and business problems. At some point, people have to face their own consequences. Marcus was practical in ways that I appreciated, but he'd grown up in a stable family that supported each other through difficulties. His parents had encouraged his tech career from the beginning, and they celebrated his successes without jealousy or resentment. I keep thinking about what they said to me, calling me a failure, telling me to live in the streets. They genuinely believe I'm wasting my life. Now, which makes their ignorance even more ironic. You've built something incredible, Hayley. You've created jobs, solved real problems, and achieved financial independence before 30. That's the opposite of failure. A soft knock interrupted our conversation. Sarah appeared in the doorway looking concerned. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I thought you should know. I was researching local business listings for that marketing report, and Miller's Diner in Westerville has a foreclosure notice posted on the county website. They have 90 days to resolve outstanding debts or face eviction. My stomach dropped. 90 days meant the situation was even worse than I'd realized. Marcus studied my face carefully. What are you going to do? I stared out the window at the Chicago skyline, watching office workers hurry along the sidewalks below. My parents had called me a failure and thrown me out of their house, all while their own business was collapsing around them. The irony was almost too perfect to be coincidental. I'm going to go home, I said finally, but not yet. First, I want to understand exactly how bad things really are. 2 weeks later, I drove back to Westerville under the pretense of job hunting. I told my family I was considering relocating closer to home and wanted to explore local employment opportunities. The lie felt necessary. I needed to investigate their situation without raising suspicions about my own financial resources. Westerville looked different in December. The autumn leaves had been replaced by bare tree branches, and Christmas decorations adorned storefronts along State Street. Miller's Diner sat on the corner of Main and 3rd, its faded blue awning and cracked front window giving it a tired, neglected appearance that I hadn't noticed before. I parked across the street and observed for an hour during what should have been the lunch rush. A handful of customers trickled in and out, but the restaurant remained mostly empty. The parking lot that Dad had described as overflowing was practically deserted. My first stop was the county courthouse, where public records revealed the full extent of their financial troubles. Miller's Diner owed $11,000 in back rent to the property management company. The business license was set to expire next month, and there was no record of renewal applications. Property tax records showed that my parents had remortgaged their house twice in the past 3 years, borrowing against equity to fund restaurant operations. Next, I visited First National Bank downtown, where Jake supposedly worked as a senior loan officer. The receptionist looked confused when I asked to speak with him about a potential business loan. I'm sorry, but we don't have anyone by that name in our commercial lending department, she said, checking her computer screen twice. Are you sure you have the right branch? Jake Miller. He would have started there about 3 years ago. Oh, you mean the Jake Miller who used to work in customer service? He left the bank 6 months ago. I think he was let go during the staff reductions. My heart sank. Jake had been lying to everyone, including his pregnant wife. If he'd lost his job 6 months ago, how were he and Amanda paying their bills? I drove to their apartment complex on the south side of town. Jake's Honda Civic was parked outside, which was unusual for a Wednesday afternoon if he was supposed to be working. I waited in my car until I saw Amanda leaving in her small Toyota, presumably heading to her teaching job. 20 minutes later, Jake emerged wearing jeans and a wrinkled sweatshirt. He looked around nervously before walking to the apartment complex's office building. Through the window, I watched him talking to someone at the front desk, gesturing emphatically and appearing increasingly frustrated. When he came back outside, he was holding what looked like a late rent notice. The picture was becoming clearer. Jake had lost his job, fallen behind on rent, and was maintaining his facade of success while Amanda worked to support them both. No wonder he'd been so eager to criticize my life choices during Thanksgiving dinner. That evening, I drove past Miller's Diner again. Through the front windows, I could see Mom and Dad cleaning tables and counting the day's receipts. The cash register tape in Dad's hands looked discouragingly short. I parked in the back alley and called Sarah from my cell phone. I need you to research something discreetly. Find out everything you can about Miller's Diner in Westerville, Ohio. I want to know about their suppliers, their debts, and any legal proceedings. How discreet are we talking? Completely invisible. No contact with the business or anyone associated with it. Just public records and financial databases. Sarah called back 3 hours later with comprehensive information. Miller's Diner owed money to 12 different suppliers, ranging from food distributors to equipment leasing companies. Total outstanding debt exceeded $340,000 when including personal guarantees that Dad had signed. The restaurant's monthly revenue had dropped by 60% over the past 18 months, largely due to competition from chain restaurants and a shopping center that had opened nearby. Most disturbing was the timeline. They'd been struggling financially for over 2 years long before my confession about law school. The cruel words during Thanksgiving hadn't been triggered by disappointment in me. They'd been expressions of their own fear and shame about impending bankruptcy. The next morning, I decided to visit the restaurant directly. The lunch crowd was pathetic. Maybe 8 customers spread across tables meant for 50 people. Dad was cooking in the kitchen while Mom handled serving duties alone. Both of them looked exhausted and stressed. I chose a corner booth and ordered coffee and a sandwich. Mom brought my order without recognizing me immediately. I was wearing sunglasses and had pulled my hair back under a baseball cap. "Hayley," she said, suddenly, her face going pale. "What are you doing here?" "I told you I was job hunting in town. Thought I'd grab lunch and see how business was going." Dad appeared from the kitchen, wiping his hands on his apron. His expression was cold and unwelcoming. "This isn't a good time," he said. "We're very busy." I looked around the nearly empty restaurant. "I can see that. Mind if I sit for a few minutes?" They exchanged glances before Dad reluctantly nodded. Mom poured herself a cup of coffee and slid into the booth across from me. "How's the job search going?" she asked, though her tone suggested she didn't really expect good news. "It's challenging. The market is pretty competitive." Dad snorted from behind the counter. "What kind of jobs are you even looking for?" "Fast food retail. Office work mostly, administrative positions, maybe some computer support roles." "Computer support," he repeated mockingly. "That's what happens when you don't finish school. You end up fixing printers for minimum wage." His bitterness was painful to witness. This man who'd raised me, who'd taught me to ride a bicycle and helped me with homework, now viewed me with complete disdain. The front door chimed as a middle-aged man in a suit entered. Dad's face immediately changed, becoming nervous and defensive. "Mr. Henderson," Dad said, forcing a smile. "Good to see you again." The man didn't return the pleasantries. "Robert, we need to discuss the outstanding rent situation. My patience has reached its limit." Mom's face went white. "Could we please handle this privately?" 3 months of missed payments isn't private anymore, Linda. You have 48 hours to bring the account current or I'm starting eviction proceedings. Dad's hands were shaking. "We have some payments coming in next week. If you could just give us a little more time." "I've been giving you time for months, 48 hours. Henderson left without ordering anything. The restaurant fell silent except for the hum of the coffee machine and the tick of the wall clock. Mom buried her face in her hands. Dad stood frozen behind the counter, staring at nothing. "How bad is it?" I asked quietly. "It's none of your business," Dad said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I'm still family. Maybe I can help somehow." Mom looked up with tears in her eyes. "Help how you don't have any money. You don't have a job. You can't even help yourself." The irony was so overwhelming that I almost laughed. Here they were facing homelessness and bankruptcy, while their daughter sat across from them with enough money to solve every single one of their problems 100 times over. My phone rang. The caller ID showed Marcus's name, but when I answered, it wasn't Marcus's voice. "Miss Miller." "This is Jennifer Walsh from Forbes magazine. We're preparing a feature article about young entrepreneurs in the Midwest, and we'd love to interview you about Streamline apps and your recent success. Would you have time this week to discuss your company's growth and the potential TechFlow acquisition?" I felt my parents staring at me as I stepped outside to take the call. Through the window, I could see them trying to eavesdrop, their faces confused and curious. "I appreciate the interest," I told the reporter, "but I'm not ready for that kind of publicity yet. Can I call you back next week?" When I returned to the table, Dad was studying me with suspicion. "Who was that?" "Wrong number," I said, "some telemarketer." But I could see doubt creeping into his expression. For the first time since Thanksgiving, he was looking at me like I might be more than just a disappointing failure. The next day, I returned to Miller's Diner during the slowest part of the afternoon. Only one elderly customer sat at the counter reading a newspaper and nursing a cup of coffee that had probably been refilled 6 times. Mom was wiping down tables that were already clean, the kind of nervous, busy work that happens when there's nothing productive left to do. Dad emerged from the kitchen carrying a box of lettuce that looked wilted and past its prime. "We're closed," he said when he saw me approaching. "The sign says you're open until 6. "Well, we're closing early today." Mom looked up from her table wiping. "Robert, don't be rude. She's still our daughter." "Is she because daughters typically don't show up just to watch their family's business fail?" I slid into the same booth I'd occupied yesterday. "Maybe I came to help." Dad's laugh was bitter. "Help how you gonna wash dishes, take orders? You think working for tips is going to solve our problems?" "I think being honest about your problems might be a start." The words hung in the air between us. Mom stopped pretending to clean and sat down heavily at the counter. Dad set his box of lettuce aside and faced me directly. "What do you want to know?" he asked. "How long have you been struggling financially?" Mom answered first. "About 2 years now, maybe longer if we're being completely honest." "The shopping center killed us," Dad added. "McDonald's, Subway, Chipotle, they opened 6 months after we expanded our seating area. Half our lunch customers disappeared overnight." "Why didn't you tell anyone? Why pretend everything was fine?" Dad's shoulders sagged. "Pride, I suppose. We kept thinking we could turn things around. Every month we told ourselves next month would be better." Mom wiped her eyes with the dish rag she'd been holding. "We haven't taken salaries in 8 months. Every penny goes to keeping the doors open and paying our 2 part-time employees." "What about Jake? Does he know?" They exchanged glances before Dad shook his head. "Jake has his own problems. Amanda's pregnancy, their new apartment, his career at the bank. We didn't want to burden them with our troubles." "Dad, Jake lost his job 6 months ago." The color drained from Mom's face. "What? That's impossible. He just told us about his promotion last month." "He was laid off during staff reductions. He's been lying to everyone, including Amanda." Dad sank into the booth across from me. "So we're all pretending to be something we're not." "Pretty much." We sat in silence for several minutes. The elderly customer at the counter finished his coffee and left, leaving exact change plus a 50-cent tip. Mom locked the front door behind him and turned the open sign to closed. "How much do you owe?" I asked. Dad pulled a manila folder from behind the counter and spread out a collection of bills, notices, and legal documents. The numbers were worse than Sarah's research had indicated. Property rent, $11,400 past due. Food suppliers, $43,000. Equipment leases, $19,000. Credit cards used for business expenses, $78,000. Personal loans secured against the house, $187,000. $340,000 total. Dad said quietly, give or take a few thousand for interest and late fees. And the house? If we default on the personal loans, we'll lose it. Everything we've built, everything we've worked for, gone. Mom started crying again. We're going to be homeless, Hayley. At our age, we're going to lose everything and have nowhere to go. My chest felt tight. These were the people who'd raised me, fed me, supported me through childhood illnesses and teenage heartbreaks. They'd attended every school play, every graduation ceremony, every milestone that mattered. Yes, they'd been cruel during Thanksgiving dinner, but their cruelty had come from desperation and shame, not malice. I can help, I said. Dad looked up sharply. Help how you don't have $300,000 lying around. What if I did? Don't be ridiculous, Hayley. You're unemployed. You dropped out of law school. You're living paycheck to paycheck just like everyone else our age. Before I could respond, my phone rang again. This time it was a number I recognized, David Chen from TechFlow Industries. Miss Miller, I hope I'm not calling at a bad time. We've finalized our acquisition offer and I wanted to discuss the terms with you directly. The $153 million figure represents our absolute best offer, but we're prepared to expedite the closing process if you're interested. I stood up and walked toward the back of the restaurant, but I could feel my parents watching every movement, listening to every word. David. I appreciate the call, but I'm dealing with some family issues right now. Can we schedule a formal meeting for next week? Absolutely. I'll have my assistant coordinate with Sarah to find a time that works for everyone. Congratulations again on building such an impressive company. Streamline Apps has exceeded every growth projection we've seen in the small business software space. I ended the call and turned around to find both parents staring at me with expressions of complete confusion. Who was that? Mom asked. A business contact. What business? What company? I could have told them everything right then. The secret was becoming impossible to maintain, and part of me was exhausted from the deception. But another part wanted them to understand the magnitude of their mistakes before learning the truth about my success. It's complicated. Dad's suspicion was growing stronger. Hayley, who are you really? What do you actually do for work? I told you I develop mobile applications. For who? What kind of applications? Business productivity software, project management, expense tracking, team coordination. And that makes enough money to help us with $300,000 of debt. I met his eyes directly. What if it does? The question hung between us like a challenge. Mom looked back and forth between Dad and me, trying to process information that didn't fit her understanding of reality. That's impossible, Dad said finally. Is it you've been assuming I'm a failure for 5 years without actually knowing anything about my work or my life? What if your assumptions were wrong? Dad's face was turning red. Don't play games with us, Hayley. We're facing bankruptcy here. This isn't the time for whatever point you're trying to make. I'm not playing games. I'm trying to decide whether to help you. Help us how? By paying off your debts, all of them. The restaurant, the house, everything. Mom gasped. Hayley, sweetheart, we know you want to help, but you think I'm lying. You think I'm some kind of delusional failure who's making up fantasy stories about success. Dad stood up, his patience exhausted. Because that's exactly what this sounds like. You're unemployed, Hayley. You dropped out of school. You live alone in an apartment somewhere, probably making minimum wage at some dead-end job. People in that situation don't offer to pay off $300,000 of debt. People in that situation, I repeated slowly. What if I'm not in that situation? And then prove it. I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app. The main account balance showed $12,743,418.62. I set the phone on the table between us. Mom looked at the screen first. Her face went completely white and she grabbed Dad's arm. Robert, she whispered, look at this. Dad picked up the phone, stared at the numbers for a long moment, then looked at me with an expression I'd never seen before. This has to be fake. It's not fake. You're showing me a fake bank account to make some kind of point about our assumptions. I opened a second banking app, then a third, each showing account balances in the millions. Investment portfolios, business accounts, savings accounts, all real, all mine. Dad set the phone down carefully and sat back in the booth. Who are you? He asked quietly. I'm your daughter, the one you called a failure and told to live in the streets. Mom started crying again, but these tears were different. Oh my God, what have we done? The weight of their realization settled over the table like fog. 5 years of assumptions, 5 years of disappointment and judgment, 5 years of treating me like a cautionary tale about wasted potential. All of it based on complete ignorance about my actual life. Oh, Dad's voice was barely a whisper. Streamline apps. I built a software company that generates $47 million in annual revenue. Last month, we received an acquisition offer worth $153 million. But you dropped out of school. I used my tuition refund to start the company, best investment I ever made. Dad buried his face in his hands. We were so wrong. We were so incredibly wrong about everything. Yes, you were. Why didn't you tell us? Would you have believed me? Or would you have assumed I was lying and making up stories to make myself feel better about being a failure? They both knew the answer to that question. Mom reached across the table toward my hands, but I pulled them back. Can you forgive us? She asked. I looked at these two people who'd shaped my childhood, who'd loved me and supported me for 18 years before deciding I was disappointment incarnate. They were facing financial ruin, personal humiliation, and the complete collapse of everything they'd built together. They were also learning that their daughter, the daughter they'd rejected and insulted, had the power to save them from all of it. I don't know yet, I said honestly, but we can start with honesty. No more pretending, no more facades, no more lies about how well everyone is doing. Can you handle that? Dad nodded slowly. We can try. Good, because if we're going to fix this family, we're going to do it right. That evening, I checked into the Hampton Inn on Route 33 and spent 3 hours on the phone coordinating my response strategy. The situation required careful planning if I wanted to achieve lasting change rather than simply throwing money at immediate problems. My first call was to Nicole Patterson, the Chicago attorney who handled Streamline Apps' legal affairs. Nicole had grown up in small-town Indiana and understood family dynamics in ways that made her invaluable for situations like this. I need you to set up a limited liability company, I told her. Something completely anonymous that can't be traced back to me personally. What kind of business activities are we talking about? Real estate acquisition, debt purchasing, possibly some small business consulting. I want to help my family without them knowing I'm involved. Nicole was quiet for a moment. Hayley, family situations like this can get complicated very quickly. Are you sure anonymous help is the right approach? I need them to understand the consequences of their choices before I rescue them from those consequences. If I just write a check and fix everything immediately, they'll never learn humility or appreciate what they have. What if they refuse the anonymous help? They're facing foreclosure and bankruptcy. They won't refuse. The next morning, I hired Thomas Rodriguez, a private investigator who specialized in financial research and due diligence. Thomas was former FBI and had connections throughout Ohio's business and legal communities. I need a complete financial analysis of a struggling restaurant, I explained. Every debt, every contract, every legal obligation. I also need background information on the major creditors and whether any of them might be willing to negotiate settlements. Thomas accepted the assignment without asking uncomfortable questions about my motivations. His reputation was built on discretion and thoroughness, exactly what I needed for this situation. While Thomas conducted his investigation, I drove to Columbus for a meeting with Marcus at a downtown coffee shop. He'd flown in specifically to discuss the family situation and its potential impact on our business decisions. The TechFlow acquisition is moving forward, he said, settling into a corner booth with his usual oversized latte. David Chen wants to finalize terms by January 15th. That gives us about 6 weeks to complete due diligence and legal reviews. And after the acquisition, your payout will be $83.7 million, assuming current valuations hold. At that point, keeping your success secret becomes impossible. Marcus was right, of course. The acquisition would generate significant media attention, especially in technology industry publications. Forbes and Entrepreneur magazine had already reached out for interviews, and my name would appear on various young entrepreneurs to watch lists. There's another issue, I said. My brother Jake is deeper in debt than I originally thought. He's 3 months behind on rent, maxed out his credit cards, and his wife doesn't know about any of it. How much debt are we talking about? Probably $30,000 or $40,000. Not huge by our standards, but devastating for someone making his income. Are you planning to help him too? I'd been wrestling with that question for days. Jake's smugness during Thanksgiving dinner still stung, but his situation was genuinely desperate. Amanda was pregnant and teaching elementary school, hardly the income level that could support a family if Jake remained unemployed. I think I have to, but Jake's pride is even bigger than my father's. He'd rather default on everything than accept help from his supposedly unsuccessful sister. Marcus stirred his coffee thoughtfully. What if the help didn't come from you directly? That afternoon, I met with David Harrison, a business development specialist who worked with Columbus area companies on expansion and restructuring projects. David's firm had excellent relationships with local banks, venture capital groups, and economic development offices. I need you to identify opportunities for bringing technology jobs to smaller communities, I told him. Specifically, I'm interested in Westerville and the surrounding suburbs. What kind of technology jobs? Software development, customer service, maybe some sales and marketing positions. Entry-level to management depending on local talent availability. David pulled out a tablet and started taking notes. Are we talking about relocating an existing company or starting something new? Existing company? Streamline Apps is considering opening satellite offices to reduce costs and access different talent pools. This wasn't entirely fabricated. Marcus and I had discussed expansion possibilities, though we'd been thinking about Austin or Denver rather than small Ohio towns. Westerville could be an interesting choice, David said. Lower cost of living, decent infrastructure, proximity to Ohio State University for recruiting. Have you identified any specific facilities? Not yet, but I'd want to move quickly if we decide to proceed. Maybe a small operation initially, 25 to 30 employees, with potential for growth based on results. David's eyes lit up with the kind of enthusiasm that comes from unexpected opportunities. I can put together a comprehensive proposal including real estate options, local workforce analysis, and tax incentive packages. When would you need this information? Next week. Meanwhile, Thomas completed his investigation and delivered a detailed report about my parents' financial situation. The numbers were even worse than I'd feared. Miller's Diner's debts totaled $367,000, when including all accrued interest and penalties. The restaurant's monthly operating expenses exceeded revenue by approximately $8,000, meaning they were losing money every single day they remained open. More troubling was the timeline for legal action. The property management company was prepared to file eviction proceedings within 2 weeks. 3 major suppliers had referred accounts to collection agencies. The equipment leasing company was threatening to repossess kitchen appliances. They have maybe 30 days before this becomes a complete disaster, Thomas reported. After that, personal bankruptcy and foreclosure on their house become inevitable. What about settlement negotiations? Are creditors willing to accept reduced payments? Some of them, yes, especially the smaller suppliers who just want to recover something rather than nothing. The property management company might accept a lump sum payment of 70% of outstanding rent if it means avoiding lengthy eviction procedures. And the larger debts? The credit card companies and personal loan holders are less flexible. They have legal remedies and they're not afraid to use them. That evening, I called Nicole to finalize the LLC structure. I want you to purchase as much of their debt as possible through the anonymous company. Whatever we can't purchase directly, I want to negotiate settlements that save them money. How much are you authorized to spend? Whatever it takes, but I want the transaction structured so that my parents think they're getting help from a legitimate business development company, not charity from a family member. Wait, Hayley, this is getting complicated. You're creating fictional business entities to manipulate your family's finances. What happens when they discover the truth? Maybe by then, hopefully, they'll have learned some important lessons about assumptions and humility. Nicole sighed. I hope you know what you're doing. I hope so too. The final piece of my strategy involved Jake's employment situation. I called Sarah in Chicago and asked her to research banking and financial services companies in Central Ohio. Look for firms that might be hiring for commercial lending or business development positions, I instructed. I want to know about salary ranges, qualification requirements, and application processes. Are you thinking about hiring Jake directly? Not directly, but Streamline Apps might need a local business liaison if we open an office in Westerville. Someone who understands banking and small business finance could be valuable for that role. Sarah was quiet for a moment. You're orchestrating a lot of moving pieces here. I know, but sometimes complex problems require complex solutions. And if something goes wrong, if your family discovers what you're doing before you're ready to tell them, I stared out the hotel room window at the lights of suburban Columbus. My parents were probably closing Miller's Diner right now, counting the day's meager receipts and worrying about tomorrow's bills. Jake was home with Amanda, maintaining his facade of employment while debt collectors left voicemail messages. None of them realized their situations were about to change dramatically. Then I'll deal with those consequences when they happen, I said finally. For what it's worth, I think what you're doing is incredibly generous. Not many people would go to this much trouble to help family members who treated them badly. They're still family. Despite everything that happened at Thanksgiving, they're still the people who raised me and loved me for 18 years. I can't just abandon them because they made some terrible assumptions about my life. After ending the call with Sarah, I opened my laptop and began drafting detailed instructions for each component of my plan. Nicole's LLC would be called Heartland Business Solutions and would specialize in debt restructuring and small business consulting. David's expansion proposal would position Streamline Apps as a forward-thinking company interested in supporting small-town economic development. Thomas would monitor the legal proceedings and alert me to any changes in creditor behavior. Everything had to appear legitimate, professional, and completely unconnected to me personally. My family needed to believe they were receiving help from qualified business professionals who had identified them as worthy investment candidates. The irony wasn't lost on me. I was creating an elaborate deception to help people who'd rejected me for being deceptive about my own success. But sometimes the truth needed careful preparation before it could be safely revealed. My phone buzzed with a text message from Dad. Hayley, can we talk tomorrow? Your mother and I have been thinking about what you said today. We owe you a real apology. I stared at those words for a long time before responding. I'll call you tomorrow. We have a lot to discuss. Change was coming to Westerville whether my family was ready for it or not. The next week unfolded like a carefully choreographed performance. Nicole's Heartland Business Solutions contacted Miller's Diner about potential debt restructuring services. David Harrison approached my parents with information about local business development opportunities. Thomas continued monitoring legal proceedings while feeding me real-time updates about creditor negotiations. Everything was proceeding according to plan until Tuesday morning when Sarah called with unexpected news. The Westerville Gazette wants to interview you for their Friday business section, she said. Apparently someone tipped them off about Streamline Apps considering local expansion. My stomach dropped. What exactly do they know? Basic information about the company, your role as founder and CEO, maybe some revenue figures. Nothing about your family connections to the area. Who's the reporter? Carol Martinez. She covers business and economic development for the paper. Seems legitimate. I'd been hoping to control the timeline for revealing my success, but local media attention changed everything. Once my story appeared in print, the carefully constructed anonymity of my help would collapse immediately. Schedule the interview for Thursday afternoon, I decided. And Sarah. Make sure she understands that this is a major story for a small-town newspaper. I want her to treat it accordingly. You're going to tell your family everything. I'm going to let them read about it in their local newspaper. Sometimes indirect communication is more effective than direct confrontation. Thursday's interview with Carol Martinez took place at Miller's Diner during the lunch hours. I'd chosen the location deliberately, wanting the community connection to be obvious when the story appeared in print. Carol was younger than I'd expected, probably in her late 20s, with the kind of eager professionalism that suggested she'd attended journalism school recently. She arrived with a digital recorder, a notebook, and thoroughly researched questions about Streamline Apps. So you're originally from Westerville, she began. Born and raised, graduated from Westerville North High School, then went to Northwestern for college. What brought you back to consider expansion here? I'd rehearsed this answer carefully. Small towns often have incredible untapped talent pools. People want meaningful work close to home, but they don't always have opportunities that match their skills and ambitions. We think Westerville could be an excellent location for technology jobs. How many positions are we talking about? Initially, maybe 25 to 30 people. Customer service representatives, junior developers, project coordinators. But if things go well, we could easily grow to 75 or 100 employees within 3 years. Carol's eyes widened. She was clearly understanding the economic impact of those numbers for a town of Westerville's size. Can you tell me about Streamline Apps? How did the company start? This was where the conversation became personally meaningful. I founded the company 5 years ago with funding from my law school tuition refund. At the time, I was a dropout with an idea for better business software. Today, we generate $47 million in annual revenue, and we're considering a major acquisition offer. $47 million. That's correct. We've grown consistently every year since launch, and we're profitable in ways that many larger companies struggle to achieve. What kind of acquisition offer? A technology company called TechFlow Industries has proposed purchasing Streamline Apps for $153 million. We're still evaluating the terms, but it's a significant opportunity. Carol was scribbling notes frantically, clearly recognizing that she'd stumbled onto a much bigger story than she'd anticipated. You said you used law school tuition money to start the company. Did your family support that decision? I paused, choosing my words carefully. Family relationships can be complicated when you make unconventional choices. Not everyone immediately understood my vision for the company. But they must be proud now. And they're learning to adjust their expectations. Success doesn't always look like what people imagine it should look like. The interview continued for another hour, covering technical details about our software products' growth projections for the potential Westerville office and my philosophy about entrepreneurship versus traditional career paths. Carol asked intelligent questions and seemed genuinely excited about the story's potential impact on local economic development. As we were finishing, she asked one final question that caught me off guard. Is there anything else you'd like readers to know about your connection to Westerville? I looked around Miller's Diner, taking in the empty tables and the tired appearance of the space where my parents were struggling to maintain their dreams. Sometimes the most important success stories are the ones happening right under our noses. I said, people in small communities are building incredible things, but they don't always get recognition because they're not in Silicon Valley or New York. I want people to know that talent and ambition exist everywhere. Friday morning, the Westerville Gazette hit newsstands with my photo on the front page of the business section. The headline read, "Local Entrepreneur Builds Tech Empire Eyes Hometown Expansion." I bought a copy at the gas station on State Street and sat in my car reading Carol's article. She'd done an excellent job capturing the scope of Streamline Apps' success while emphasizing the potential local benefits of our expansion. The story mentioned my law school background, the company's financial performance, and the TechFlow acquisition discussions. Most importantly, she'd included several quotes that would resonate specifically with my family members. Success doesn't always look like what people imagine it should look like, and family relationships can be complicated when you make unconventional choices. By 9:30 that morning, my phone was ringing constantly. Sarah called from Chicago to tell me that 3 other publications wanted interviews. Marcus called to discuss media strategy for the acquisition announcement. David Harrison called to say that the Westerville Economic Development Office was ecstatic about potential job creation. But the call I was waiting for came at 11:15. Mom's number appeared on my screen. Hayley. Her voice was shaky and uncertain. Hi, Mom. We just saw the newspaper. The whole town is talking about it. People have been calling us all morning asking about our daughter, the entrepreneur. What are people saying? They're saying you're some kind of business genius. They're saying you built a company worth millions of dollars. They're saying you might bring hundreds of jobs to Westerville. I could hear Dad's voice in the background, though I couldn't make out his words. Is the article accurate? Mom continued. Yes, it's accurate. The part about $47 million in revenue, that's real? That's real. And the acquisition offer for $150 million? Also real. Mom was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke again, she was crying. Oh, sweetheart, we're so proud of you. We're so incredibly proud, and we're so sorry for the terrible things we said. Mom. No, let me finish. We were wrong about everything, everything. You weren't wasting your life or throwing away opportunities. You were building something amazing, and we were too stubborn and ignorant to see it. Dad's voice came on the phone. Hayley, this is your old man. I owe you the biggest apology of my life. Dad, it's okay. No, it's not okay. I called you a failure. I told you to live in the streets. I said those things to my daughter who had accomplished more by age 28 than I'd accomplished in my entire life. His voice was thick with emotion, and I felt my own eyes starting to tear up. You built a company that employs dozens of people. You created software that helps businesses operate more efficiently. You took an idea and turned it into something worth millions of dollars. And when you tried to tell us about it, we refused to listen because we thought we already knew everything about your life. We're not asking you to forgive us immediately, Mom added. We know we hurt you badly, but we want you to know that we understand how wrong we were and we're going to spend the rest of our lives making it up to you. Before I could respond, I heard commotion in the background. Voices, lots of voices, and what sounded like car doors slamming. What's happening there? I asked. Reporters, Dad said. 3 different TV stations and 2 more newspapers. Everyone wants to know about the family of the famous tech entrepreneur. And customers, Mom added with wonder in her voice. The restaurant is packed for the first time in months. People want to eat where the millionaire entrepreneur grew up. I had to smile at that. How are you handling all the attention? We're trying to be gracious and proud, Dad said. Though honestly, we're mostly just stunned. Yesterday we were facing bankruptcy, and today we're celebrities because our daughter is apparently some kind of business genius. About the bankruptcy, I said carefully. Have you heard from any of your creditors recently? Actually, yes, the strangest thing happened. Some business consulting company called Heartland Solutions contacted us about debt restructuring. They said they specialize in helping small businesses negotiate better terms with suppliers and lenders. My chest tightened. What did they offer? Comprehensive debt analysis and negotiation services for a very reasonable fee. They think they can reduce our total obligations by 60 or 70% through direct settlement negotiations. That sounds helpful. It does. We're meeting with them next week to go over the details. I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of all my careful planning and manipulation. My parents were still facing financial ruin, but now they had hope. They were also dealing with media attention, customer curiosity, and the complete reversal of their understanding about their daughter's life. Hayley. Mom's voice was hesitant. Are you really thinking about opening an office here in Westerville? I'm considering it seriously. That would bring jobs to our community, real good-paying jobs for people who've been struggling to find opportunities. That's the idea. You're not just doing this because of our situation, are you? Because we don't want charity even from you. I almost laughed at the irony. They were unknowingly accepting charity through Heartland Business Solutions while rejecting the possibility of charity from me directly. I'm doing it because Westerville has good people who deserve better opportunities, including you and Dad. We love you, Dad said simply. Whatever else happens, I want you to know that we love you and we're proud of you, and we're sorry we ever made you doubt that. I love you too, I said and meant it completely. After ending the call, I sat in my car watching people walk in and out of Miller's Diner. For the first time in months, there was actually a line of customers waiting for tables. My phone buzzed with a text from Jake. Holy crap, sis, you've been holding out on us. Can we talk? Everything was accelerating faster than I'd planned, but maybe that wasn't a bad thing. Secrets had been keeping my family apart for too long. It was time for truth to bring us back together. 2 weeks later, I stood in front of Miller's Diner watching contractors install new signage and replace the cracked front windows. The changes were subtle but significant. Fresh paint, updated lighting, and professional quality repairs that transformed the restaurant's appearance from tired to welcoming. Inside, Mom and Dad were training 3 new employees while managing their first consistently busy lunch rush in over 2 years. The newspaper article had generated sustained customer interest, but they'd also implemented several operational improvements suggested by Heartland Business Solutions, improved menu organization, faster service protocols, and better cost management for food inventory. Hayley, Mom called when she saw me enter. Perfect timing. I want you to meet our new assistant manager. The young woman behind the counter looked familiar, though I couldn't immediately place her face. This is Jessica Chen. She just graduated from Ohio State with a degree in hospitality management, and she's helping us modernize our operations. Jessica shook my hand enthusiastically. I'm such a huge fan of your work with Streamline apps. When I heard you might be opening an office here, I immediately applied for a position with your parents. I figured working in food service would give me valuable small business experience before transitioning to tech. I glanced at Mom, who was beaming with pride. We've had 12 applications for part-time positions since your story came out. Apparently, working for the family of a famous entrepreneur has become very desirable. Dad emerged from the kitchen carrying a plate of their signature meatloaf. For our celebrity daughter, on the house, of course. The transformation in both my parents was remarkable. The stress lines around Dad's eyes had softened, and Mom moved with energy I hadn't seen in years. They looked like people who'd rediscovered hope after months of despair. How are things going financially? I asked quietly. Better than we dared to hope, Dad said, sliding into the booth across from me. Heartland Business Solutions negotiated settlements with all our major creditors. Instead of owing $340,000, we owe $160,000, and we have 2 years to pay it off interest-free. That's incredible. It gets better. Daily revenue has increased by 300% since your article appeared. If we maintain even half these numbers long-term, we'll be profitable for the first time in 2 years. Mom joined us carrying coffee for herself and refills for our cups. The best part is that people aren't just coming once out of curiosity. They're becoming regular customers because Jessica helped us improve food quality and service efficiency. Speaking of service efficiency, Dad added with a grin, we've actually started using some of your company's software. TaskFlow helps us coordinate between kitchen staff and servers, and Expense Track is making our bookkeeping so much easier. I had to smile at that irony. They were unknowingly using software I'd created while still adjusting to the reality that I'd created it. There's something else we need to discuss. Mom said, her tone becoming more serious. Jake and Amanda want to meet with all of us this evening. They have some things they need to tell you. Good things or bad things? Honest things, which I suppose is what matters most. That evening, I drove to my parents' house for our first family dinner since Thanksgiving. The atmosphere was completely different this time. Nervous but hopeful, rather than tense and judgmental. Jake and Amanda arrived looking nervous but determined. Amanda's pregnancy was showing more prominently now, and she glowed with the kind of health and happiness that made her beautiful despite the obvious stress she'd been carrying. Before we eat, Jake said, I need to confess something to everyone. We gathered in the living room rather than around the dining table, creating a more intimate setting for difficult conversations. I lost my job at the bank 6 months ago. Jake began, his voice steady but his hands shaking slightly. I was laid off during budget cuts, and I've been pretending to still work there because I was ashamed. Amanda reached for his hand. We've been living on my teaching salary and maxing out credit cards to pay rent. Jake has been going to job interviews and applying everywhere, but nothing has worked out. How much debt are you carrying? Dad asked gently. $37,000 in credit cards, plus we're 3 months behind on rent. Without Amanda's income, we would have been homeless by now. Mom's face showed the same kind of pain I'd seen when she realized her own family's financial struggles. Why didn't you tell us we could have helped somehow? Jake laughed bitterly. Help how? Until last week, I thought you guys were successful restaurant owners, and I was the family failure. I couldn't admit that the supposedly successful son was actually drowning in debt. And I couldn't admit that the supposedly successful parents were actually facing bankruptcy. Dad added. We were all protecting facades that prevented us from helping each other. I looked around the room at my family. Each of us had been struggling privately while maintaining public pretenses about our lives. The irony was overwhelming. Jake, I said carefully, what if I told you I might have a job opportunity for you? What kind of opportunity? Streamline Apps is opening a satellite office in Westerville. We need someone to manage local operations, handle community relations, and coordinate with area businesses about our services. Jake's eyes widened. You're serious about the Westerville expansion? Completely serious. We're looking at office space on State Street, and we want to hire 25 people initially. The local manager position would pay $68,000 annually, plus benefits and profit sharing. Haley, I don't have any tech experience. But you have banking experience, customer service skills, and you understand small business financing. Those are exactly the qualifications we need for someone who'll be working with local companies. Amanda started crying, happy tears this time. That would change everything for us. We could pay off our debts and actually start saving for the baby. There's one condition, I added. The job requires complete honesty about your background and qualifications. No exaggerating your experience, no pretending to be more successful than you are, no maintaining facades that prevent you from doing good work. Jake nodded immediately. After the past 6 months, I'm done with pretending to be something I'm not. Good, then you can start next month as soon as we finalize the office lease. Dad looked bewildered. Haley, you're creating jobs for your brother, helping save our restaurant and bringing economic development to our community? Why are you doing all this for people who treated you so badly? I've been thinking about that question for weeks, and I finally had an answer that felt complete and honest. Because family isn't about perfection, it's about forgiveness, growth, and second chances. You guys made terrible assumptions about my life, and you said hurtful things based on those assumptions. But you also raised me, supported me, and loved me for 18 years before any of this happened. I paused, looking at each of them directly. More importantly, your mistakes came from fear and shame, not malice. You were facing financial ruin and struggling to maintain your dignity. When you discovered I'd dropped out of school, it felt like confirmation that your family was falling apart in every possible way. Mom wiped her eyes with a tissue. That's exactly how it felt. Like we'd failed as parents because both of our children were struggling. But we weren't struggling. We were just struggling differently than you expected, and we were all too proud to ask for help or admit our real situations. Dad shook his head slowly. You're more mature than any of us, sweetheart. At 28, you've built something incredible, and you're using your success to lift up everyone around you. I learned from watching you guys. You worked 16-hour days trying to save your restaurant, not just for yourselves, but to keep your employees paid. You took out loans against your house rather than default on your obligations. You sacrificed your own comfort to maintain your responsibilities to other people. We still called you a failure? Jake said quietly. We still told you to live in the streets. Yes, you did, and that hurt more than you'll ever know. But people say cruel things when they're scared and desperate. What matters is whether you learn from those moments and choose to do better. Amanda spoke up for the first time in several minutes. What happens now with all of us, I mean? I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in months. Now we start over. No more secrets, no more facades, no more assumptions about each other's lives. We build honest relationships based on who we actually are rather than who we think we should be. And the restaurant, Dad asked. The restaurant succeeds or fails based on your hard work and smart decisions. I'm not going to subsidize it indefinitely, but I've given you a foundation to build on. What you do with that foundation is up to you. 6 months later, I stood in the grand opening ceremony for Streamline Apps' Westerville office. The building on State Street had been completely renovated with modern workspaces, collaborative meeting areas, and a community room that local organizations could use for events. 28 employees had been hired locally, including Jake as office manager and Jessica Chen as business development coordinator. Miller's Diner was thriving, consistently profitable, and had paid off 60% of their restructured debts ahead of schedule. During my remarks to the assembled crowd of employees, local officials, and community members, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this point. Success isn't just about financial achievement or professional recognition, I said. It's about using your opportunities to create positive change for the people and communities you care about. I looked out at the audience and saw my parents sitting in the front row, beaming with pride. Jake and Amanda were there with their 3-month-old daughter, my niece Hayley Marie Miller, named in honor of the aunt who'd helped turn their lives around. Sometimes the most important victories aren't the ones that make headlines. They're the quiet moments when families choose forgiveness over resentment, when communities support each other through difficulties, and when people find the courage to admit their mistakes and do better. After the ceremony, Mom approached me with tears in her eyes. Do you think you can forgive us completely? She asked. For the things we said, for the assumptions we made, for not believing in you when you needed us to. I hugged her tightly, feeling the last traces of resentment and hurt finally dissolve. I already have, I said. The question is whether you can forgive yourselves and learn to trust each other enough to prevent this kind of misunderstanding from happening again. We're trying. Every day we're trying to be more honest and more supportive. That's all any of us can do. As I drove home to Chicago that evening, I thought about the life lesson that had emerged from this experience. Families are complicated, relationships require constant work, and assumptions can destroy even the strongest bonds if left unchallenged. But love, forgiveness, and second chances can also rebuild what seemed permanently broken. Sometimes the people who hurt us most are the ones struggling with their own fears and insecurities. Sometimes the cruelest words come from the deepest pain. Most importantly, success means nothing if it doesn't include the people who matter most to us. Building a company, accumulating wealth, and achieving professional recognition are wonderful accomplishments, but they're hollow victories if they come at the cost of family relationships. True success is measured by our capacity to lift others up, to forgive those who've wronged us, and to use our opportunities to create positive change in the world around us. It's about choosing love over resentment, growth over stagnation, and hope over despair. My parents had called me a failure and told me to live in the streets. They'd been wrong about everything. My capabilities, my achievements, my potential for success. But they'd also given me something more valuable than any business degree or professional credential. They'd shown me the importance of family perseverance and believing in something bigger than yourself. Now, as Streamline Apps continued growing and the TechFlow acquisition moved toward completion, I knew that my greatest achievement wasn't the company I'd built or the wealth I'd accumulated. It was the family I'd helped heal and the community I'd chosen to support. Sometimes the most important success stories are the ones that happen quietly in small towns, among people who learn to see each other clearly and choose love over judgment. Those are the victories that matter most. What about you? Have you ever experienced a situation where family assumptions or misunderstandings created painful conflicts? How did you work through those challenges, and what did you learn about forgiveness and second chances? Share your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to hear your stories about family success and finding your way back to the people who matter most. Thank you for joining me on this journey of discovery, growth, and healing. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to the channel for more inspiring content, and share it with someone who might need to hear about the power of forgiveness and family reconciliation. Remember that success comes in many forms, but the most meaningful victories are often the ones that bring people together rather than pulling them apart. Keep believing in your dreams, stay true to your values, and never underestimate the transformative power of love and understanding. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other.